Cody is an amazing product guru, and I think he's going to be really, really awesome to learn from today. We have a wide variety of discussion topics from just getting started with startups, starting companies, what are the common mistakes that he has seen, how many companies do you think you've seen? Like thousands of companies?
I mean, I probably directly work with a few hundred.
Just a few hundred.
Yeah. Seen thousands, but yeah.
And then as well as just product management in general, what Cody has done himself from being the chief product officer stumbled upon to VP of product at Yahoo, and I think he recognized Derek did you guys overlap?
Yeah.
Awesome. And then so I think there's going to be a lot of great learning for all of us today. And just by a show of hands, how many of you guys have thought of or want to start your own company? All right, so quite a bit. This is a great audience for Cody. And then so, I want to get started by maybe let Cody talk a little bit about himself, how he got started. It's a pretty impressive resume, so I don't want to mess it up. So maybe I'll let you kind of do a little bit of introduction of yourself, and then we could go from there.
Sure. Awesome. Well, thanks. Good to get a chance to chat with everybody. Hopefully we get a bunch of time for questions and stuff too. So I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Kansas, and I was actually born in Texas and then grew up most of my childhood in Kansas, and decided when I was in college I wanted to learn something I knew nothing about, and so I ended up becoming a major in Chinese, and got to go live in China a couple times and experience that. I studied in China one summer, and I had an internship over there one summer. It was actually back in the 90s when Bill Clinton was going to China. It was the first U.S. president to visit China since Nixon. And what's that?
好棒。
不错，现在我中文真不太好，可是还可以。
Impromptu for those who understood it.
And I had an internship at the State Department, so I got to be part of this presidential visit and everything. It was pretty cool. But I moved in '99 when I graduated college to San Francisco. Still to this day, don't really know why. I moved there because I wanted to use my Chinese language skills, and I guess I assumed there were a lot of Chinese people in San Francisco. I don't know. It's closer to China than Kansas was. So I moved there, and but believe it or not, China wasn't in the WTO yet. We were coming off the heels of the kind of late 90s Asian financial crisis. I couldn't find, and I had really no skills other than, my Chinese language skills, and I couldn't find a job doing anything with import, export, or anything Chinese. Had no tech background at all. The one job offer I got was, I still to this date think it might have been like the Chinese mafia or something, because it involved getting people in and out of the country, and I decided I probably didn't want to take that job. But I was living in San Mateo, California, which is a suburb of San Francisco. I was the 7th person in a 2-bedroom apartment, sleeping on shag carpet in the living room in a rubber boat with a shower curtain around me for privacy.
Wow.
And my roommate's boss's wife ran HR for this internet startup. I didn't even really know what that was. And I ended up getting a job in this tech startup called Snap.com. And my job, this was pre-Google era, this was a search engine. My job was to literally be kind of a human search algorithm. I found websites in the travel category and manually plugged them into this search engine. It was basically a data entry job. I was, categorizing the title of the website, the 256 character description of the website, and trying to organize it ontologically in this directory structure. That company ended up getting acquired by NBC, spun out as its own IPO on the NASDAQ called NBCI. The stock went up to $100-something, and then 9 months later, the stock dropped to $2, and everyone got laid off. That was 1999, 2000, 2001 era San Francisco .com boom, crazy shenanigans. But during that time, I managed to transition myself into a product management role. Just pure hustle. There was no such thing really as internet product management. Product came from the shrink wrap software world, where a product manager traditionally had defined requirements through this PRD and actually, their job was to put product on shelf in places like Best Buy, where you would go buy your copies of Windows 95 and take it home and install it on your computer. And so I worked my way into this product management role, and we'll go through a lot of this, I think, but sort of built a career in product management as product management on the web was becoming a thing.
What is product management?
Yeah. All right. So, to me, it's changed a lot, right? And I'll go through this, but just really quickly on some of the things I did. So I worked at this company in BCI. We got laid off. I then moved back to Kansas for a year, worked at Sprint in product management, and helped build the first sort of downloadable ringtone engine back in 2001, 2002. Really was not happy there. Went to grad school in London for a year. Then we moved to New York, where my wife got into grad school, and ended up taking a product role at the New York Times. So helped a lot of the early New York Times online efforts. And then in 2005, moved to LA with Yahoo. So Yahoo brought me out here. I was at Yahoo for too long. I was there for almost 7 years, but kind of worked from being an individual contributor, product manager on the search marketing side of things, up through eventually was VP of product at Yahoo for Yahoo's media and entertainment products here in Santa Monica. And then went to StumbleUpon and then TechStars. So that's my brief kind of career transition. TechStars being kind of my first non-product role, where I'm more on the investment side, working with startups. But what is product management? So I think the product manager's job is to know the customers as well or better than anybody else, and be able to articulate the future of what customers want by de-risking the product through data. So their job is to know the right experiments, to understand the delta between what the product is today and where you think you want the product to go, and to experiment your way toward proving whether or not that vision of where you think you want the product to go is correct or not. I think what the product manager is not is the definer of what those features should be necessarily in abstract, nor is the product manager necessarily the one establishing sort of the dates and deadlines of when something should ship to market or not. I feel like that the product manager role gets confused a lot across those functions.
Got it. Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about, so from the shift to Yahoo to StumbleUpon, obviously you say you were in a media group, or?
I was at the end of my time at Yahoo, yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then were you building products for end users, so like the audience, or you were building products for business users?
All the above. In my time at Yahoo, my last 3 years there, I was running Yahoo's entertainment group. So that was things like Yahoo Movies, Yahoo Music, a bunch of properties that probably don't exist anymore, because I don't know if Yahoo's fully, well, it does exist, but in a different form.
Right.
But early, in the middle time of my time at Yahoo, I was running product for Yahoo's developer platform, so all of Yahoo's API infrastructure. Right. So I had a few different roles.
And how is that different from and to StumbleUpon being the chief product officer and define the user experience and making sure that people are coming back, right? Because obviously, for a site like that, everyone's fighting for eyeballs. Yep. and user engagement.
Well, the best thing about StumbleUpon was a much smaller, more intimate environment building product, right? So rather than when you're like a VP level at a company like Yahoo or even a Google or wherever, like a lot of what you're doing when you're running product is fighting for your own resources, who then are the ones who define the products, right? You're not as much hands-on building the product yourself. And when I was at StumbleUpon, it was back to being hands-on, working with the product managers, working to define the products and the experiments we were going to run and all of that. And the thing that StumbleUpon was great at was A/B testing and experimentation. Just a very data-driven culture. And I learned a ton about that in my time there, and really, I think that comes from it was just a very engineering-centric place, which is great.
Yeah.
The thing with StumbleUpon in that role was product was consumer product, but it was also the advertising products. It was also mobile experiences. It was really in response, also our publisher interfaces. So it was sort of responsible across that full stack, which meant that any change you make to one thing, you're not negotiating with some other team who owns that customer. You're responsible for all of those customers. And I like that environment a lot better, where you have to think about the meta impact of a change here and what it's going to do to your advertising business or what it's going to do to your publisher business.
So really having good sense of the business overall too. Yeah. I think we'll get into the product management a lot more because we have a lot of product managers here
Great.
here in the audience. But so how do you transition into an investor role where you're involved with U.S. probably the largest accelerator program and have invested in companies like Uber, Class, Twilio. That's a lot of companies. Like, how'd you make that transition?
I made that transition really by giving my time first. So I was mentoring with TechStars before I was ever involved, on an employment basis with TechStars. I started mentoring TechStars. I don't know how many people are deeply familiar with us, but our mission is to help entrepreneurs succeed, and we do that through a few different channels. Probably most known for our startup accelerators. We run now about 28 or 29 startup accelerators around the world, about half of which are deeply vertically focused, where we work together with a partner or set of partners around a vertical channel and help accelerate you down that vertical channel, and about half of which are horizontal, like our original program, TechStars Boulder, or TechStars New York, or TechStars Seattle, or TechStars London. So I started mentoring with TechStars Boulder, and knew one of the people running it at the time, who had actually been a colleague of mine at Yahoo, and just fell in love with helping startups. I had been mentoring here in LA as well, back when Launchpad LA was around.
Yeah.
And helped out with that some as well. Had some friends whose companies went through Launchpad, and was helping out with Boulder. I had moved up to the Bay Area to join StumbleUpon. Was in the process of looking to move back to LA, and the TechStars guys, I guess, thought I was helpful enough that they said, "Hey, do you want to help us get up and running in LA?" And it just worked out.
That's
So
cool.
yeah, I mean, it was a transition for me, learning from building product all day to helping other founders build their products. And I think especially in the first year or two of that transition, I tried to lean in with the thing I knew, which was product. So I would really try to help founders with product issues they were having. I've now sort of rounded out how I work with founders across the broader set of early stage issues founders deal with, but started by leaning into my strength. And that's, in general, probably one of the things I've learned as one of the most important things you can do. Everyone has areas they want to develop and areas of growth, but how do you lean into those things through your strength as opposed to leaning into your development areas with total kind of blind weakness. It just helps you be more effective as you're transitioning yourself.
Yeah. And let's talk about some of those a little bit. This is especially, so we're 4 years in, and Andrew, my co-founder, and I started 3 companies and so far, and it's a pretty tough journey. And I think many of the startups that you work with, you've probably seen a lot of ups and downs and the untold stories of the struggles and the founders' depressions is fairly common. Founders breakup is actually the #1 reasons why startups break up too. So tell us a little bit more about some of the traits that you've seen that really help startups succeed in the long term, or as well as maybe things that you see in founders that are common traits that really help them propel them to kind of overcome some of the setbacks that most people go through.
Yeah, well, I think first I want to just touch on one of the things you mentioned, which is founder depression. It's actually Mental Health Month right now, and I think that's an area of founding companies that gets talked about a little, but not enough. How much mental anguish goes into starting a company. The fact that most people who are founders are very driven people who probably have lots of different paths they could go down and know that they're putting all those paths on the line or on hold to do this thing. And there's often a lot of second guessing around opportunity cost and things like that go into founding a company. And then the added pressure of once you start hiring people and bringing other people on board, you're putting their own opportunity cost on the line as well, right? And not to mention, it's more than just opportunity costs. Often it's personal credit card debt and all sorts of personal burdens that you take upon yourself as a founder. Other people, you take investor money, and all of a sudden you're fiscally responsible for trying to return that investor's capital back to that person as well. We live in a country where through C Corp laws and whatnot, luckily we typically have an environment where you're not personally liable for capital you've taken, but man, you're emotionally liable for that capital. And so there's so many pressures that sit on a founder's shoulders. And I do think that recognizing lots of founders go through depression, lots of founders go through, really dark times isn't just a cliche. It's real reality. Like I can't imagine getting a call one day that a founder that I worked with, did something like take their life, or like went into real that dark of a place. But it happens, right? I think the more and more people who jump into entrepreneurship, not fully ready to embrace how hard that can be, I think that will happen more and more, actually. Which
How hard is it? Especially now, venture capital is a lot more available today. There are a lot more seed investors. So I think getting started with a company is not as hard as it used to be. And so what would your advice to those that want to start companies? How do they be mentally prepared? How, there are a lot of resources and blogs to read.
Yeah.
But what do you think are, sort of the top 3 things that you think about, given that your experience of having mentor over hundreds of companies?
Yeah, I think the best thing you can do as a founder is find, or maybe not even as a founder, as someone who's thinking about starting a company, is again, if you can mentor other founders using your own, again, lead with your strength. What are you great at? Are you great at sales? Are you great at marketing? Are you great at product? You can probably be a mentor to other people who are founding companies with your narrow vertical expertise area of focus, even if you can't be a mentor to them on the broader set of being a founder yet. Mm-hmm. And that gives you a lot of runtime and hands-on time with founders, where you're lending some expertise to them, but you're also hearing their side of what they're going through. And the more you give to someone, any great mentor-mentee relationship is going to be two-sided, right? Mm-hmm. The more I give to someone through what I'm good at or where I think I can offer value, I'm going to learn and receive value back. And so just getting a lot of exposure to a founder when their gloves are off and they're not, your boss, right? But they're engaging with you because they're actually trying to learn from you is a great way to kind of experience on their side of things what they're going through or what they're thinking about. It's not the same as, doing it yourself, but it certainly exposes you to that.
Sure.
I think your point of there are more startups. It's easier to start a company. It is easier to start a company today. It's not necessarily any easier to scale a company. Getting that product market fit stage and getting to that stage where you have enough revenue to support your business, or you have enough growth to support your business over time, is still really hard to do.
Just how important it is, especially right now at the stage we are. And Derek actually talked about product market fit, and we're just like crossing the chasm. How important it is for a business to be self-sustainable? Because most startups, a lot of times we talk about just raising money, but then sometimes certain companies lose sight, and then you eventually shut down because you don't have a business model to support it. Have you seen, just with your time at TechStars, how what happens when companies lose sight of that?
Well, I don't think there's a hard and fast black and white rule around that. I think it's one of those things that is, how hard to swing at growth versus how hard to build the business, so to speak. I think really is an individual company decision that is unique to the people involved in that company. It's important as an employee of a company to know where the company that you're joining or you're part of is thinking about that, from what kind of business do they want to build. It's important if you're thinking about investing in a company to know that, what kind of business do those founders want to build. There's nothing wrong with building a revenue generating profitable business that doesn't raise any venture capital or raises a little bit of venture capital and builds an incredibly high growth profitable business. It's just not aiming for years and years and years of unprofitable scale. Mm-hmm. Right? Venture businesses are aiming for what I would call unprofitable scale, where you are throwing money to help grow the problem in a way that is unsustainable over time, but you think throwing money at the problem can help you get there a lot faster than anyone else, where you can win market share ultimately, right? Versus if you're bootstrapping a business or you're growing a business just through revenue, you can still win market share. There's no rule that says you have to throw money at a thing to make it go. But you may also grow more slowly, and that can be totally fine. I look at a business like 37 Signals, the team that built Basecamp, right? They've built a huge business just on revenue. They've bootstrapped that business and turned it into something really powerful, and that's great. You also look at what gets called kind of the classic agency business, right? Which is, a business that's 100% cash flow oriented, is just generating cash flow each month, and maybe even pays dividends back to the owners of the business on an annual basis. They're never trying to retain profit inside the C Corp for the purposes of reinvesting in R&D and growth. They're just trying to distribute money back to the owners of the business. That's a totally fine business too. Mm-hmm. So it really depends on the people involved.
Cool. Yeah. And so you meet thousands of founders probably, and what are the top qualities you look for?
Yeah. So first of all, I look for, is this someone I want to work with? Do I like this person? Would I enjoy spending 5 to 7 to 10 years of my life in the trenches helping this person? In terms of, so that's like baseline one for me. I've
so likability.
For me personally, yeah. Every investor has different ways they look at that. I look at that for sure. I look for exceptional CEOs, like CEOs who just, when I'm around them, I feel like they light up the room. And that is such an intangible thing to say, but everyone knows who that person is, right? And when you're near them, they just have this spark to them that inspires and motivates people, because the CEO, is going to be the spark that is going to be the energy that drives the business. No matter how big the business is. Look at Zuckerberg and Facebook today, but especially in those early years. I also look for just incredible drive and execution. So from the first time I talk to them, if I challenge them on something or ask them a question, the next time I talk to them, have they gone and figured that thing out, or they've knocked it out, or they've experimented around it, and they have data that shows this, that, or the other. They can disagree with me. That's totally fine. And then if they have data that proves that what I thought was a great idea was clearly wrong, that's awesome, right? And so they show that they can just drive and execute. They don't just talk. What else do I look for intently in great founders? People who feel like they were put on earth to go make this thing happen for whatever reason. Which again is intangible, but coupled with those other things, I think is important.
So likability, ability to motivate or light up the room, unparalleled desire to execute, and or follow up, and then just hardcore, dedicated focus to solve a problem.
Yeah, and then I guess one more thing as well, which is coachability, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't like to work with. I personally don't like to work with very defensive people, and so looking for someone who is willing to listen to feedback. They don't have to agree with the feedback, but they're willing to dialogue around the feedback in an open way. That's important to me as well.
Yeah. What's one of the best advice you've received?
Yeah. So one of my personal best pieces of advice that is actually one of the things I try to live my life by. It's from a colleague of mine who was a colleague at Yahoo. And then now he's a colleague of mine at TechStars. But he gave me this advice before we were TechStars colleagues. And he told me, it was when I was in the middle of a career transition point. And I
From a product manager to investor, or?
When was this? No, this was when I was looking to leave Yahoo, and I'd been at a big company for 7 years, and I was considering going to StumbleUpon or considering a big company executive job.
How big was StumbleUpon at the time?
It was 100 people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow,
so still not a big start, still not a baby startup,
right.
But yeah. And he said, look, you can optimize for career, and in 30 years wake up and you said you can optimize for career path, and in 30 years wake up and have had a great career, or you can optimize for doing something interesting, and in 30 years wake up and have lived an interesting life. And that has always stuck with me. I think it is how I had guided myself before he told me that without me realizing it. I mean, this, I studied Chinese and like fell into the .com world and all this stuff, right? And like I had kind of optimized for doing interesting things and not really caring what it led to, as long as I was happy in the moment doing something interesting and learning. And I think when he said it, it really crystallized in my mind how I wanted to guide the remainder of my time here, professionally.
Yeah. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Still thinking about that quote. Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then so now tell us a little bit about, you saw how many hands raised when we asked like people who want to start companies. So tell us a little bit about TechStars as a program, and I'm aware that there's a LA TechStars as well as a music specific and medical a specific program. So tell us a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah. So so I was saying, probably most famously known for our accelerators. I'll spend most of the time on that, but I do want to talk about two other parts of our business briefly. We also run all the startup weekends around the world. So if you've ever thought, hey, I think I might have an idea for a startup, I want to know what this stuff's all about, you can go over the course of a weekend and over 72 hours validate whether or not your idea has legs and whether or not it's worth you thinking about quitting your day job to pursue it. The scale of that is amazing. We run about 1,100 startup weekends around the world in 600 cities in over 130 countries around the world. So places like Cuba, places in the Middle East. Like we're really, I think, trying to make an impact around the world, just teaching what this entrepreneurship thing even is all about. And then on the other side of TechStars is our venture capital funds, which is a couple $100 million fund that primarily invests in companies in our network. So it's not just out there sourcing deals kind of all over the place like a VC fund. We point that money at TechStars companies for the most part. But our accelerator programs, as I mentioned, we run about 28 or 29 around the world. They are 3-month intensive mentorship driven programs to connect you with mentors around your business and help you accelerate your company to the next step. Each program selects 10 companies, give or take, per program. So individually, each program feels really small and intimate because there's only your company and 9 other companies. There's a dedicated managing director, which is the person who runs the program, and a pool of mentors around your program. Each of these programs are distributed geographically. So we run 3 here in LA. We run 2 in Seattle. We run 3 in New York. We run 1 in Atlanta. We run 1 in Chicago, Austin, Boston, Boulder, Berlin,
they typically come
Cape Town.
with an idea or just a PowerPoint presentation?
The company?
The company.
It is. It's varied. I would say it's competitive enough that most of our companies coming in are have some degree of business traction. I would say on average, our company, if it's a revenue generating business already, it's going to be in the few thousand MRR to even 10 or 20 or more thousand MRR. I mean, these are kind of false benchmarks because again, there are no rules. This is just sort of on average. But and if it's a just a user growth focused business without revenue,
like an app,
like it's going to be seeing some kind of growth rates. But we've had napkin drawings come into the program. One of our more successful companies is Keen.io. They came into TechStars literally as 3 super amazing founders who had kind of a napkin drawing at the time. And we backed them because we knew that the team was phenomenal. On the other hand, I funded Sphero when it had already raised tens of millions of dollars and already had millions of dollars of revenue. And so different things come in at different times. So in LA, we run currently 3 programs. I used to run a program we don't run here anymore. We ran a program with Disney for a few years called Disney Accelerator. Disney's still running that. It's a little bit of a different focus now, but when we were running it, primarily focused on sort of seed stage startups, integrating companies together that are thinking about the media and entertainment space, giving them access to Disney and helping them build relationships there, but also accelerating their business independently as a startup. And then today we run 3 programs. One is TechStars Music, which is just finishing up its first class. We have demo day next Thursday. That's a program all focused on companies that are innovating in and around the music space. We run that together with a bunch of great partners.
Can you talk about the one that you were just telling me?
Yeah, sure.
It's AI for music. It's
Yeah.
so cool.
We have two AI music companies in that class, in the current class of companies. One is a company called Amper. They just raised a few $1 million, led by Foundry Group. They are creating it's an AI engine for creating basically the next generation of scoring, right? So if you're shooting a commercial and you need a score, or you're shooting a film and you need a score, you can sort of say, here's the mood or the tone of the song that I want, and it'll give you a base track that you can then adjust up or down or whatnot. But it's completely generated by AI. Like nothing is pre-recorded there. You can say, I want this instrument or that instrument. And then we have a different AI company called Popgun that is the original founder of We Are Hunted, which was that company got acquired by Twitter and became Twitter Music. And Popgun is an AI music engine trying to create the next great pop label. The next great pop. They want to be the next great pop musician. Is this AI? So some cool stuff going on there.
That is really cool.
So TechStars Music is in partnership with Warner Music, Sony Music, Sonos, Harmonix, which is the creators of Rock Band and Guitar Hero, and then 4 major management promotion companies here in LA. We have the Cedars-Sinai Accelerator powered by TechStars, which just finished our second program about 3 weeks ago. That's all focused on health tech startups, kind of a broad range of health companies, everything from primarily focused on things selling into hospitals, but everything from insurance plans to medical devices to SaaS platforms into hospitals, data providers.
Medical scrubs, figs.
Yeah, that's right.
Which we work with.
Yeah. And then we have TechStars LA, which is our horizontal catch-all program here in LA that is industry agnostic and just focuses on great companies looking to build a community here in LA.
Cool. That's so as you were kind of talking about the list of cities and how many programs you have in each city. I know LA and New York both have 3 programs, and so given that now your roots is in LA, what's your view on LA as a tech scene? There's definitely a lot of activities and companies that are being born out of LA versus the Bay Area. And what's your are you excited about what's happening in LA? Do you feel like we have with Snapchat just went public and now we have real tech here?
Right. We've always had good tech in LA. It's just not been in startups, right? For you look at some of the stuff that's always gone on with JPL and some of the aerospace here in LA. It's incredible. You look at some of the tech that powers animation and special effects. It's incredible, right? So that talent, which is really incredible, uniquely specified tech, has just never been focused on the kind of the startup economy, if you will. And I think over the last 5 years, that's shifted like crazy. So a lot of that FX tech doing all the VR startups now, right? A lot of the aerospace tech is doing, whether it's at SpaceX or even a lot of the drone technology that's going on, or a lot of the microsatellite stuff that's happening. A lot of those people who traditionally would have gone into classic aeronautics, now have these sort of startup channels to go after. I think that's all happened in the last few years. A lot of people who previously would have innovated a media model inside a big company have decided that because of access to capital and just general know-how about how to do startups, they can innovate a media startup independently. LA's bread and butter for years was ad tech and e-commerce. That's where LA, I think in the mid-2000s, sort of saw its first set of internet companies come out. And they were, because there was less capital here and because LA hadn't traditionally returned a lot of capital to investors, they were by necessity more, back to our earlier conversation, bootstrappy revenue kind of focused companies. I think the one thing Snap has really done for LA is it's proven you can build a high growth, high venture backed company in LA. I think that's great, right? So it rounds out LA and gives it lots of options. You can still build. There are a lot of people in LA who know how to bootstrap and know how to build a SaaS business and know how to build revenue and know how to manage a balance sheet really well at the startup stage. and you also now have people who know growth. And the other thing Snap and I would add Tinder to that list have done in LA is they've brought consumer product know-how to LA in a big way.
Versus Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah. And LA, I don't think was really known for that
Yeah.
before. Even at Yahoo, most of the product people were up north. You had MySpace here, which was probably the first big scaled consumer tech product in LA, but I don't think was ever deeply respected for a consumer product necessarily. So I think that's been great for LA.
And what are you seeing in LA? So given those are your observations,
Yeah.
and are you just seeing the speed in which startups are coming out now? Just a lot. There's just so many more.
Oh, it's incredible. So many startups. I mean, we were just talking about this building, right? How many startups you all have had move in here in the last 2 years? But I'm seeing that all around the country, all around the world, really, but definitely all around the country. My philosophy is we're living in our lifetime's version of the Industrial Revolution. Or if you think about the Industrial Revolution, it started in London, and in the 19th century, and then sort of spread everywhere else. And I think the same thing's happening with software right now. Right? It started in the Bay Area, but it's spreading everywhere else. It's affecting every economy, right? Like no one was talking about automotive startups 3 years ago, and now it's like one of the hottest spaces in startup world because the incumbents have realized they need to pay attention to software and automation, and they're investing dollars. The VCs are investing dollars, and that space is exploding. That's happening in all sorts of industries and verticals, right? The fact that we're working with a hospital like Cedars-Sinai, who's investing in startups, shows that every industry is paying attention to this. And
that's amazing because that's an industry that historically moved really slow.
Really slow, right?
Governments working with startups too.
Absolutely. And again, we're seeing this in cities all over the country. Explosive startup communities, not just where we have accelerators, places we don't as well. Cincinnati is a great startup community right now. And you look, and they've got Procter and Gamble, and they've got Kroger. They've got big divisions of large companies there who know that they need to help provide an innovative core to their city as well, because it's good for their business to have lots of innovators in their community. That's right.
Yep. So I want to make sure people have time to ask you questions too, but I want to ask you a few really quick questions so people get to know you more. What are your top 3 apps that you use on your phone?
Oh man, let's see. What do I use? So we are addicted at TechStars to this app called Voxer. Has anyone used Voxer? So it's basically WhatsApp, except that it's more focused on voice.
Okay.
So it's asynchronous, push voice messaging, kind of like those annoying old like Nextel phones that go beep beep beep, like that. Like that's what it is, and that's what all of TechStars uses for kind of less or more urgent than an email, less urgent than a phone call communication. And in fact, I would say we default to not calling each other because we're a totally distributed company. So that's a work app I use. Let's see. I've been loving Overcast, which is a podcast app. I've never been a big podcaster listener, and over the last 6 months, I've tried to listen more to podcasts when I drive rather than music. I've always been more just like put on some tunes when I drive, and Overcast has been a cool podcast app. I enjoy it. I am addicted right now to 2 baseball games. Tinder. I have a hilarious Tinder story I shouldn't share. It involved, as a product guy, using Tinder for product feedback and finding a family member on it and be like, oh my God, this is not good. Addicted to Major League Baseball Derby, which is a home run derby app. It's really fun. And then a different baseball game called MLB Tap 2017. It's a
Tap.
It's a tap game. Yeah.
All right.
Anyway, yeah.
What's the thing you do to de-stress?
I used to go surfing a lot. Now I just play with my kids. I travel so much. Like when I'm home, go throw the baseball with my kid, or go swimming or whatever. So it's just family stuff.
All right, and then last question: if you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Oh man, I'm torn between flying or infinitely holding my breath underwater. So I guess that means sort of like being able to be mobile in places that I otherwise couldn't be. How about that? I'll roll it up into one.
All right, that's pretty good. All right. So I'm sure a lot of you guys have questions, and I want to make sure we save time for you guys to ask Cody. And I don't know if you could stick around for like 5 minutes
Of course.
afterwards for a beer. But anyone has questions?
Yeah. Yeah. %. I mean, the classic example is the like landing or splash page, right? It's sort of the like you can literally find 5% more signups by moving a button placement or changing a color. 5% doesn't sound like a lot, but the compound interest of 5%, even weekly growth is dramatic increase in total number of conversions or total number of users. On the flip side, the test that people tend to forget is if you run a test like that, and you may be converting a lot more users who end up being lossy users who aren't your target market. You end up converting them down a funnel, only to find out that they don't retain. I mean, this is what you guys do as a business, right? Like this stuff. Right. And if they don't retain and if they become negative detractors of your business, obviously that can really damage you over time too. But I see so many startups either who have, in particular, a consumer user sign-up flow, who either never thought about it, or who only designed it based on what they thought was right because they copied some other startup sign-up flow, as opposed to ever running any kind of test on how they should convert users through that funnel. The other thing I see a lot of startups fail to do, and again, I tend to personally be a little more consumer-oriented, is you go through the sign-up flow, and then they fail at activation. And so I go through, I sign up, and I land on a screen that is the exact same screen as a user who's been using the product for 12 months and has tons of built-up data in the application gets. And one of the things I like to challenge startups to do is, if you haven't done it in a while, go through a clean, it's actually really hard to do because Facebook locks you in so hard, but if you can figure out a way to go through a clean, or watch someone go through a clean install of Facebook when you have 0 friends, and watch what the experience is like of using Facebook for the first week with 0 friends, and how they train you how to use Facebook, and how they train you how to pull your friends in, it is unbelievable. And all 3 of the major kind of mid-2000s consumer growth social networks are good at that. Facebook, Twitter, and even Twitter, who's gotten so dinged for growth, they're pretty good at it. Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, if you can, go through a clean install of those, it's an incredible exercise to do. And just watch what that onboarding is like. So that's an area where I encourage, especially consumer startups, to spend a lot of time. Once they feel like their core product has some stickiness and retention to it, if you can find even little tweaks on those flows where you're, if you were dropping 2 or 3% of users on the floor and you can convert them, those add up. The compound interest of catching those things adds up over time into dramatic user growth. Yep. Yeah. We have a company here in LA right now called Impact Health. Has anybody heard of Impact Health? CEO's amazing woman, Christine Carrillo. They went through TechStars New York a few years ago, and they're going through that right now, where the revenue growth is. They're setting incredibly aggressive targets, and every month they're beating them. And she's, I don't want to overly kind of, give inside baseball on a startup as they're in the middle of it, but has been going through the debate of how hard do I step on the growth pedal, because this thing is working, and I just want to pour fuel on this. She could easily, it's driving revenue. She could easily dial back on growth and just be profitable, and focus on little things here and there in the product, or she knows right now she has the chance to just leapfrog everyone else in what she does, which is basically a kind of a next generation health insurance broker, and is just deciding to swing for the fences, but has had to go through that mental exercise of, do I want to do that? Because if I go out and and raise a lot of money, that's I'm taking on a lot more risk. I'm bringing in a lot more investors. I'm setting the bar that much higher for me to make this company, at the end of the day, successful and able to return capital. Versus, hey, I've already raised some money. I already know I can build a profitable business really easily, and I have line of sight into returning capital for the money I've already raised from investors. So it's a hard thing to sort of decide to do as a CEO. I'm trying to think of an example. I'm pausing because the answer is absolutely, and I'm trying to think of an example because that's more useful. I'm struggling to come up with a specific example, but more often than not, it's because the data said don't do this, but there was a bigger downstream implication that the data was impacting, that was causing the negative number. So gosh, I hate answering a question with an abstract, but like an example would be, I'm going to go back to a sign up flow use case. An example would be you tweak something in the sign up flow. Let's say you instead of asking me to state a few preferences like categories of things I care about. Again, I'm being a little abstract. Instead of asking me to do that, you don't, and you try to figure that stuff out while I'm using the product. What you see is an immediate increase in first session use because I'm using the product and I'm clicking through it more because I'm trying to figure out what it is because I actually don't get it, right? And so the data is showing higher first session use. But what you see when you peel back the covers is lower retention, right? And so you have to run that test for a longer amount of time, and you need to look at that cohort, not just on D1 metrics, but you need to look at D7 and D30 retention numbers, because I maybe had great, high numbers in my first session, but that's because I actually didn't know what I was doing and I couldn't figure it out. And if you come back and you look at that user down the road, they've churned out. And so, that's one where the data initially shows you that it's great, but it's at the sacrifice of other things that you weren't paying attention to at the time. Does that answer your question? Yeah, don't take any test you can rat hole yourself if you take this to the extreme, but you don't want to take any one test in isolation. You need to take a test, and this is where there's science to being a product manager, but there's a lot of art, right? You need to take a test, look at the data in isolation, but then think about the downstream impacts of that everywhere else. I'll give you another great example. Actually, this is a good example. This is from Yahoo. This is old. This is 10 years old. Yahoo made well over 50% of its revenue from search results, right? Sponsored search. And so the conventional wisdom is increase the search box on the page, people are going to search more, which is true. If you increase the search box on the Yahoo search result page, people searched more. Here was the problem. What did they not do? They didn't check their email more. Why did most people come to yahoo.com? To check their email. And so if you throw them into a search box and they go away and search, now they're on ESPN or CNN or whatever search result they got, TripAdvisor, and they're off to doing their thing, and they're not checking their email. Versus if you don't prioritize the search box, they actually sign in to check their email, which, by the way, if they sign in, check their email, and then run a search, if they're signed in, the value of them as a searcher is through the roof higher because you have all of their data when you're returning search results. So again, a test where conventional wisdom necessarily doesn't hold the broader implication of the change. Yep. Oh.
The question is, what advice would you give your 25 years old self?
I think I would tell myself to stop worrying about things and that things would be okay. Enjoy things more. I personally in my 20s, I put a lot of stress and pressure on myself to figure things out. What was my, like, I had this feeling that doors, if I made the wrong decision, a bunch of doors were going to close in front of me, right? And that a decision to take this job versus that job, or to go to this school versus that school, or to go back to grad school and major in this thing versus not that thing, were going to create this existential, like, vortex of choice for me where I would never be able to just go back and do the other thing I didn't do, right? And in some cases, there's a moment of time where, like, yeah, man, if you would have, taken a job at Facebook in 2004, your life would definitely be different than it is right now, right? But, like, can't stress over what you didn't choose. And so I think, not that I had a job offer at Facebook in 2004, just to be clear.
We'll pretend you do.
That would be sweet. But I think my biggest advice to my 25-year-old self would be to have confidence in myself that no matter which of those decisions or which of those things I did, things were going to be fine. And to just trust that I'm going to go figure out whatever it is I figure out, and I will never have known the difference of what the other path might have been. It's easy to say now. Yeah.
Matt?
Yeah. Um, I wish it was a better story, but I would say the latter. Like, it was really clear to me that I enjoyed it more. I have I'm easily distracted. I like working on lots of different things, and I think for me, it was such a fit for my personality to be where I am now, where I get to work with lots of different founders on lots of different problems. As opposed to, product, like, your job is actually to be actually pretty narrowly focused and, like, make this thing better. Like, you're caught between incrementalism and, and like moving the ball forward, really far. You're kind of caught in the middle of that. You move it far by having a vision, but you get it there by incrementing your way there and kind of incrementing to the vision. And I think I'm much better in a place where my job is to be kind of an inch deep and a mile wide, and that's just me getting to know myself better, I think, over the years.
I think Longshin had one last question, and we'll wrap up.
Yeah. Has my Chinese language skill ever helped me outside of China? I mean, back to the original story, that's sort of how I fell into the tech world in the first place, though that was indirect. Other than that, I have to say it's really sad. Like, I haven't used my language. It's atrophied pretty badly at this point. It's kind of a funny story, novelty for me at this point, and I can surprise people at a restaurant. But I wish I used it more. I feel like it's one of the things in life that I should keep investing in, but I haven't. I've just gotten to the point where I'm okay with that. But I put a lot of time and energy into it at one point in my life, for sure. Sweet dog.
It's Heisenberg, everyone. All right, well, with that, I want to thank Cody for coming out. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. And Cody might stick around for a few minutes before we have to take the
Yeah,
405.
yeah, I can hang.
And a round of applause for Cody. Thank you
you.
guys.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.